Okay, everybody, thanks for joining us here today. Just before we get started, we're going to do an election of the chair and vice chair as it is a brand new year. I'd like to open the floor for nominations. Are there any nominations for chair? Councillor Wall.
I nominate Nathan.
Hey, Nathan, do you accept the nomination?
Yes, I do.
Do you have a seconder for the nomination? Councillor McCreary, thank you. Okay. Are there any other nominations for chair? Okay, seeing none, we will just need to do a 2/3 vote, just as Nathan has exceeded the 2 terms that are allowed for a chair. So if we wanted to do a 2/3 vote for the mayor, or for the mayor, for Nathan, if you'd like to raise your hands if you are in favor of another term for Nathan. Okay, all those opposed? Okay, motion carries. Great. Thank you very much. Are there any nominations for vice chair? Councillor Wall, sorry.
I nominate Tamara.
Okay. Tamara, do you accept the nomination?
It is my first term on this committee, but I do accept the nomination. I'm comfortable with being a vice chair.
Awesome. Is there a seconder for the nomination?
I will second that.
Nathan, okay. So seeing as there are no other nominees and Tamara has never served as chair or vice chair, she is actually acclaimed as vice chair for the next year with the terms expiring in January of 2022. All right, Nathan, you can go ahead and get started.
All right, thank you. And thank you for my very temporary promotion there. I will move on to, if I can get my screen working here. The roll call has been taken by the clerk. I'd just like to remind everyone of the procedural rules to help operating the meeting as efficiently as possible. All members should remain muted when not speaking for the meeting to reduce feedback. All web cameras for Heritage Committee members shall be turned on. Staff will be requested to join the video meeting should the need to answer questions arise. Persons who have registered for this meeting and who are speaking to applications will be brought into the meeting upon introduction of the item. Any member of the Heritage Committee should indicate they wish to speak by pressing the raise hand icon on the participant list screen. In the event of a connection service interruption that affects quorum of the Heritage Committee, we may recess for up to 15 minutes to regain quorum. If quorum is not achieved, the meeting will be adjourned. All members of the Heritage Committee participating via online video conference will vote by a physical show of hands. The chair will indicate to leave your hands raised until he has determined the result of the vote. Thank you for your patience while we navigate this new pathway. So moving on, we will move into declarations of conflicts of interest. Does anyone have a declaration of conflict of interest at this time? I must declare that I have a conflict under 5.1 as the applicant has to deal with my employer. So I will turn it over to my newly elected vice chair for this item.
Well, thank you. Let's see. So 5.1, that's the item for consideration is the application under Section 34 of the Ontario Heritage Act for application HD-01-20, the demolition control bylaw 156-2019 to remove and relocate the Crystal Cottage from 35 Chatham Street. Now I'm afraid at this point, I did read the report, but I understand that this is it's really just asking for our signatures at this point as part of the committee to be included in the staff's report. Do we need 3 signatures? Who's there? Who's my admin?
Right, it's me. So yeah, so we will get to forward comments as part of this item. But first we will have a presentation from Mark, who is representing the applicant, and then we'll have a quick presentation from the staff as well. So Mark's here if he's ready to go. I'll get his presentation up.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to do a short presentation on the staff report outlining the process to relocate 35 Chatham Street. As I've said, I'm Mark Lattis, and I'm representing Market Street Development Inc. for this application. Next slide, please. So currently there are 9 buildings on this site, and one building, 35 Chatham Street, has a heritage designation. On the diagram, you see the location of 35 Chatham in the context of the overall development outlined in red at the very top there. And it's situated close to the center of the subject site. Therefore, the cottage could not be retained in situ, but we did consider moving it to the edge of the property, thereby retaining it. But I will explain why that could not work in the next slide. Next slide, please. So the proposed site plan here shows the new building will occupy 90% of the site. The Crystal Cottage could not be retained in situ, though this retention was a mitigation strategy considered at the outset. The entire site will need to be excavated to permit the creation of one-story or one level of underground parking, and the entrance off Nelson Street and a street service entrance off Chatham Street is where the cottage is now. The main frontage along Market Street will include 724 square meters of new commercial space that would be accommodated in up to 9 shop fronts. This will replace the 3 commercial units being removed at this with this proposal. This will help reestablish Market Street as a viable commercial street. Surface parking is at the back, and in addition to the underground and podium parking on the second floor. The entire 0.47 hectare site is occupied by the new building and required on-site parking. Next. So here's a drawing of the proposed mixed-use building, and the project will include 200 rental apartments and 724 square meters of new commercial space along Market Street. The proposal is an $80 million investment in downtown Brantford and will generate about $300,000 to $400,000 in municipal taxes annually. I want to remind the committee that, as outlined in the Heritage Impact Statement prepared as part of this proposal, the design of this building referenced several buildings within the Victoria Park Heritage Conservation District, most notably the Bell and Ontario Foresters building. The 3-story height of the podium, the use of limestone as the building material, the articulation into 2 distinct block faces, separated by a prominent recessed building entrance in black granite, echoes the design of the heritage buildings to the south. This creates the impression for pedestrians of 2 buildings similar in size to the Foresters building. The podium is terminated with a strong, simple cornice line. The building is also incorporates best practices outlined in the city's urban design guidelines, most notably in the extensive use of stepbacks at the rear or west elevation, and use of 3 building materials to break up the visual impact of the building, as seen from here. We feel that this building represents the best heritage and urban design practices as stipulated for the downtown Brantford Heritage Conservation, for the Urban Growth Center. Next slide, please. As staff have mentioned in the report, several heritage impact statement studies were undertaken, including the Heritage Impact Assessment and associated addendum, Stage 1 and 2 archaeological assessments, and building removal report. Currently, all the processes and approvals associated with moving 35 Chatham to 53 Charlotte Street are being undertaken now. The applicant has budgeted $400,000 to relocate the cottage to its new home. Next slide, please. So the applicant is in agreement with the staff report and agrees to the following: that the applicant will enter into a heritage easement agreement with the city, and that the easement is temporary until the cottage is relocated. The applicant agrees to taking of securities to cover the cost of the relocation and building restoration as a precautionary step as identified by staff. We're suggesting that $50,000 in securities be taken by the city for this purpose. The applicant will have an engineer to monitor the restoration and the relocation and to complete an assessment of the Crystal Cottage once it's installed at 53 Charlotte to ensure that there is no structural damage to the building as a result of the relocation. The applicant has also provided high-resolution catalog photographs of the Crystal Cottage prior to its removal. The applicant will provide information plaque to 53 Charlotte Street in accordance with the recommendations of the HIS addendum, as well as information plaque will be installed at the new building. And finally, designation bylaw 685 will be repealed from 35 Chatham after the Crystal Cottage is successfully relocated. to 53 Charlotte. Next slide, please. So to quickly summarize this proposal, it creates 200 rental apartments in the downtown Brantford Urban Growth Center, of which 20 to 40 units will be affordable units. The proposal fulfills the intent of the provincial policy statement, the growth plan, and the City of Brantford's official plan and urban design guidelines. The Crystal Cottage will be relocated and conserved within downtown Brantford. We still have a number of things to accomplish before the Crystal Cottage can be relocated and construction can begin. The applicant is now in the process of completing a site plan approval for the new building, and we would be in a position to begin demolition and excavation in March if we receive conditional site plan approval. However, we are waiting on the museum to complete a variety of tasks in order to receive the cottage, including a site plan agreement, building permit, and severance application to the Committee of Adjustment. Meanwhile, the applicant has applied for a building moving and demolition permits, and we are just waiting on the sign-offs from various city departments for that, which we expect will be completed within the next week or so. Approval of the demolition permit will address the loss of the one residential unit in the cottage, and this is addressed in the staff report. And we anticipate construction can start in late spring 2021. Next slide. So thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Councillor Wall?
Thanks, Mark. Really appreciate you being here. And I mean, I really appreciate all the work that you guys have done to relocate the Crystal Cottage so far. So please pass that on to everybody who needs to hear it. It's amazing that this came together. When it first came to us, I didn't know what to think. And this is really cool. So my only question is, any surprises? A lot of people that I talk to about this ask, like, how is this even possible? How are they literally going to lift up that cottage and move it to that site? So any surprises so far?
Through Madam Co-Chair, not really. I think the only issue, and a lot of thanks to Councillor Dan McCreary for his assistance with the museum and trying to get their side of the preparatory done. It has taken a little longer than we anticipated. We were hoping actually that all of this would have been completed in late fall. So that's the only issue right now, is that there was, sort of a bit of a delay there. But other than that, everything has been pretty straightforward. We're assured by both our contractor who's moving the building, as well as the museum's contractor who will receive it on the foundation, that it's a pretty straightforward project. It's a small building. It's under 1,000 square feet. So other than, complaining on the part of the applicant about costs, and as I said, it's about $400,000 to move this building. I think everything has been going, I think, fairly smoothly. Thank you.
So final question, and thank you. Are you guys going to document it? Are you going to have somebody come out and video it?
Through you, Madam Chair, we weren't anticipating it, but that's a great idea. Maybe we should consider it.
I think it would be amazing if you could reach out, maybe even to our economic development. This is a big deal. I mean, the people of the city really care about the Crystal Cottage. And I think it could be a really great opportunity to show that Brantford is an innovative place, that instead of just destroying heritage, we are helping to preserve it and to documenting it from your perspective as well as our perspective. I'm sure there's an opportunity for the two departments to work together. And I think it'd be amazing to promote the Heritage Committee too. So maybe I'm a little self-serving on it, but if you could just talk to the powers that be and talk to Kevin Finney and Sarah Monroe at Economic Development and Tourism, and Nathan too, but he's not here.
Very good.
I just had one question for you, Mark, as well. I've driven by it a few times. I'm intrigued by the whole process that's going on as well. And I know that it is up on the beams now, and there are pictures even attached. It's amazing that they can do something like that. I'm just wondering, because it's been, without heat, without hydro for this amount of time, like, has there been some deterioration in it? Like, has it been preserved, or will it be sort of once restorations, I guess, occur, bring it back to its former glory?
Mm-hmm. Through you, Madam Chair, Vice Chair. Our main concern has been break and enter. we have had ongoing problems with several of the buildings that are proposed to be demolished for break and enter. Our worry, particularly for 126 Market, has been that it would be set ablaze. We've had multiple break-ins. It's a vacant building. There's nothing in it. We don't know why. Similarly, 120 Market has been broken into as well. So that is our main concern. The building, the Crystal Cottage itself, not a really concern about, because the interior has been completely altered. There is really no original features, and I expect that the museum, for their own purposes, may want to completely refresh and alter that interior. The shell itself, like I said, we were preferring that it be done in fall so that it would be at the site and, on a new foundation. But I think the length of time here has not been deleterious to the building. The building, as we all know too, was not in top condition. It was in fair condition. But we have been monitoring with staff the condition of the brick, wood elements, the porches, which are subject to damage, are inside the cottage itself, protected. So, and many of the bricks have been evacuated to the museum site for reuse down the road.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it. Does anyone else have any questions for?
Madam Chair, yes.
Go ahead, Councilor McCurry.
Mark, thanks for your work on this file. And if you could just make yourself a note to send me your contact info at the end of the meeting if I want to talk to you about another matter. Did I hear it said that there's a $50,000 security in play until the building is on the new foundation?
That's right, Councillor. We're offering that as a security.
Okay. And if I recollect, having seen the sale contract, the proponent is going to restore all the features that have been dismantled and to ensure that the building is ensure that the building, when it transits to the new owner, is in the condition that it was in before, right?
Right. That basically, if there's any damage, the clock, I guess, starts ticking, Councillor, when the building was put up on the jacks. And if there's any damage that occurs in progress to the new location, we'll cover those.
Right. Okay. And you put everything back the way it was. Now, the Mark, the bit on the back, has that been demolished and removed?
Yes, it was a new addition, if you recall.
Yeah.
It was covered in vinyl. It was not historic. And as we both know too, the condition of the roof is very poor. The slate tiles are not original. And so, it would be left at the museum to determine what kind of roofing material they would want. We don't recommend that you continue to use these slates.
Yeah. The committee has received a number of requests in the last couple of years for the ersatz slate, which looks and feels the same, but it's about 1/10 of the cost and doesn't require specific trades. Mark, I want to point out, come back to Councillor Wall's request that we make a video record of this, and I'll provide you with the name. We had an inquiry in some time ago from a heritage TV show that wants to follow this process, and I'll provide you with their info, and you can be in touch with them, okay, as well as the folks at the City of Brantford. And that's all my questions, and I want to thank you again very much for making this happen.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Councilor McCurry. Anyone else? No.
We're just going to have staff give a brief presentation now as well.
Thank you. Just full screen, yeah. Okay. So now, are we adding? Oh, there it goes again.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the Heritage Committee. I'm Patrick Bruce, I'm a planner with Long Range Planning. I'm just going to give a staff presentation on application HD 0120, which is to remove the Crystal Cottage under the Ontario Heritage Act and the corresponding application under the Demolition Control Bylaw. So the property at 35 Chatham Street is designated individually under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. It's designated by City of Brantford Bylaw 6-85. This is actually one of the earliest properties the City of Brantford has designated under the Ontario Heritage Act. The property is also within the demolition control area established by Bylaw 156/2019. Demolition control is a tool provided by the Planning Act, and the purpose of demolition control is to protect residential properties from premature loss. And this is just an image of the Crystal Cottage. This is circa 2019, so this shows the Crystal Cottage with porches added to the front facade and side facade. Shows the slate roofs, gingerbread trim, and we can see two chimneys at each end of the cottage. And so just as a refresher, as Mark had been indicating, so the property along with 35 Chatham Street and 120 to 138 Market Street was subject to a planning application, zoning amendment PZ 0220, and it's for a 10-story mixed-use building with 200 dwelling units and 724 square meters of commercial space. This committee was circulated when on the application's heritage impact statement and on a subsequent addendum to that heritage impact statement. Council has approved application PZ 0220 on November 24th, 2020. And as part of that approval, the zoning is subject to a holding provision. So holding provision acts in a way to prevent the development of a property in conformity or in compliance with its zoning until certain conditions are met, and that holding provision or that holding symbol is removed from the zone. In this instance, the relocation of the Crystal Cottage and approval of the demolition application under the Heritage Act, that's the section of the Heritage Act that we're working under, is approved. So until that happens, this property cannot be developed as the applicant had proposed, and as it was approved. As was indicated, the applicant has been proposing to relocate the Crystal Cottage from 35 Chatham Street to a new property, 53 Charlotte Street. This property is owned by the Brant Historical Society, and they have entered into an agreement with the applicant for Market and Chatham. Because 35 Chatham Street is designated, council approval is required before a demolition permit could be issued. And a demolition permit under the Building Code Act is required to relocate the property as well, to simply just to pick it up and remove it from the property. Furthermore, because of the demolition control bylaw, which protects dwelling units, council also has authority to issue approval to the demolition before it can be done through the building code. And Brantford Heritage Committee traditionally reviews demolition control applications to determine if the property in question has any heritage potential. And at that point, the Heritage Committee has an opportunity to comment to council on that matter, but the authority to approve either application rests with council. This is in contrast to the alteration applications, which do typically come before the Heritage Committee. That's a different section of the act, and that authority was specifically provided by council. In this case, the Heritage Act gives committee a commenting and consulting role, and then council retains the full decision-making authority. But under both, we are dealing with these applications. So under the demolition control bylaw, under the Heritage Act, they're being dealt with as one report, one item to move through the city processes. So relocation is a fairly unique solution. It's not one that is common, and this is across much of Ontario and much of the country. Relocation is a very complex process, even with, let's say, a new building. Once you add historic buildings in play that have very particular heritage value or interest, and oftentimes also have quite a history or an age, the challenges to physically move a structure, something that most structures are not designed for, can be quite a challenge to overcome. Another factor about relocation as a solution for heritage conservation is that relocation can have a negative effect on a property's cultural heritage value or interest. So federal guidance, that's the Parks Canada Standards and Guidelines, notes that do not move a part of a historic place if its current location is a character defining element. So again, place, siting can all be important to a property's heritage value. Similarly, provincial guidance, that would be the 8 guiding principles in the conservation of built heritage properties. Principle number 2 is respect for the original location. Again, where there is that value in location, relocation will not preserve that. An example of this could be a farmhouse or a prominent building that is sited within the landscape, or it's part of a particular view, where looking on it and seeing its siting on that landscape or its interaction with the landscape, if that is located to a new lot, perhaps an inner city lot, that context is lost permanently. Now, in this instance, Bylaw 685 recognizes the Crystal Cottage for its architectural value. The bylaw notes that it's an exceptional example of a cottage built around the middle of the 19th century and is well preserved in good condition and an asset to our city. The designation is on architectural grounds for preservation of part of Brantford's heritage. And that occurred in 1985, and now over 30 years later, the applicant prepared their heritage impact statement, which looked at the property through the current up-to-date regulations under the Ontario Heritage Act and the criteria they spell out, and similarly reaffirmed the architectural value of the Crystal Cottage, but confirmed that there was no cultural heritage value or interest that was tied to its location or its association with a well-known individual. So in this specific instance, the relocation of the building to avoid true loss through demolition does have the effect of conserving that architectural value, provided the relocation is successful and that the building can be restored once it is relocated. Still, it is a complex project, and there are several steps. Before the physical move can occur, there's permitting and procedures both to prepare the building and to make sure all relevant authorities and all relevant legislation is followed to ensure that the move occurs safely and successfully. From the perspective of the actual procedure to relocate the building, the first step, as the applicant indicated, was to remove the exterior features that could be a challenge to relocate, could be fragile, and may get damaged. So front and side porches were removed earlier this summer. The non-historic rear addition was removed. Where chimneys protruded above the roof line, the heritage impact statement did note that there was evidence of spalling brick, lost mortar, and so there was a concern that if the chimney stayed in place, if the building was lifted, at some point those chimneys could fall, and that would present a health and safety risk for any workers or members of the public. So just in this picture, we see the Crystal Cottage with the front porch and side porch are removed. The porches themselves were stored by the applicant on the property. Posts are located within the building. The roof structure is located on the property at the rear and is stored there. We also see a pile of bricks. Bricks were relocated to the Brant Historical Society's property. So here we have another picture. This shows the side porch that was removed. In all cases, you can see the course of bottles that are in the exterior walls and what lends the name Crystal Cottage. In this third picture, we see excavation and removal of bricks in the foundation. This is the next step. So steel beams are installed at the base of the cottage. They run under the walls and the load-bearing sections of the building structure, and they act to support the building. Once that's completed, the next step in the relocation process itself would be to have jacks placed under the steel framework. A unified system controls all of these jacks to make sure that the lift is gradual and even across the entire structure, so that one portion does not lift too fast and the other remain too low, that would cause quite a bit of damage. So a unified system ensures the lift is gradual. As the building is lifted, the applicant's consultant proposes that wood beams are stacked underneath, and that helps to act as a catch and to alleviate some of the load from the jack. So as the building height increases, new wood beams can be stacked underneath. Once the full height is reached, the option is for dollies or a flatbed to be wheeled underneath the structure, have the jacks release the weight of the building and have it rest on the dollies or on the flatbed. The flatbed or dollies can then move the building to its future site. Once the building is relocated to 53 Charlotte Street, the applicant proposes the steps are just simply done in reverse order to lower the building onto a new foundation, which would be prepped and ready for the Crystal Cottage. These steps have occurred early this summer. No formal heritage approval was granted at that time, but on the understanding that this building was always proposed to be relocated for conservation, these just form part of the necessary steps. So based on the information provided by the applicant, based on the cultural heritage value that is ascribed to this property, staff will be recommending to council that the application under Section 34 of the Ontario Heritage Act will be approved, and we're recommending that it is subject to conditions. And those conditions would relate to necessary applications or permits being approved and issued. And we're also recommending that the applicant enter into a heritage easement agreement for 35 Chatham Street. The intent of all of these conditions, and more detail will be provided over the coming slides, but the intent is that all of these conditions are there to ensure that the relocation is coordinated and it occurs safely and it occurs successfully. The conditions that are described here are the conditions that staff anticipate recommending to council. We are in discussion with other departments and with the applicant. And so if any conditions can be addressed prior to the approval, there is potential that some of them that are described here tonight may not appear before council, but only because they've been addressed, and that just through ongoing discussion. In addition to the approval, staff will be recommending that the designation bylaw, which is bylaw 685, be repealed after the Crystal Cottage is successfully relocated. By waiting until the Crystal Cottage is relocated, we ensure that 35 Chatham Street is protected in the interim and leading up to the move. And should anything happen, it retains that ability to negotiate with the developer on other solutions. Once the building is successfully relocated, once the Brant Historical Society has had the opportunity to restore the building, staff are recommending that at that point, staff would prepare a report on the potential designation of 53 Charlotte Street, and that would ensure that the Crystal Cottage remains protected for future generations on the new property. Again, the heritage value comes from the architecture, so once restored, that heritage value and interest should remain. And as council in 1985 indicated, that architectural value is an important part of Brantford's heritage. And lastly, just to address all the applications and all the matters before us, we're also recommending that the demolition control application for 35 Chatham Street be approved. And that's on the basis that from the protection of residential units, we will be gaining 200 resident dwelling units in the long run. And in the Heritage Committee's perspective and commenting role with respect to cultural heritage, that cultural heritage will be preserved once the building is restored on a new site. So this is a flow chart. It's attached to the staff report as Appendix I. It provides an overview of the relocation process. So the first stage, number one, which is application. This is the stage we're currently at. So the applications have been submitted by Market Street Developments. The city is currently considering the applications. Step two represents conditions that would be recommended to council and their clearance. So once approval is granted with conditions, the applicant will start having to clear conditions in order to receive the full approval under the Heritage Act. And again, these conditions are Again, just there to ensure that the move is safe, that the relocation is successful. In considering these conditions, staff have been in contact with other municipalities in Ontario where buildings have been successfully relocated, and a lot of these conditions are based off of things we have heard as best practices from those other staff. Steps or conditions that ensured that move would be successful. In this case, conditions, because we're moving from 2 properties and 2 owners, we have conditions that deal with 35 Chatham Street, that's the donor site or the original site, and the receiving site at 53 Charlotte Street. So through the heritage easement would spell out terms of the move and impose certain specific requirements. These requirements are not specific to an application process, but help to define the relocation itself. So one proposed inclusion in the heritage easement is the taking of securities. Securities are a common development tool. The city often uses them through processes like the site plan control process for specific development and site design matters. It's something that's common to the development industry, and the development industry is very familiar with. So staff are proposing that securities would be taken to cover the relocation costs, as well as the construction and restoration costs. If the city needed to step in at any point, the securities would be drawn on rather than city budgets or city accounts. If the city does not need to be involved in the move, then the securities remain untouched and are returned to the applicant at the end of the process. Another requirement through the heritage easement would be for an engineer to monitor the move and to prepare a structural assessment. Having an engineer present allows for someone to monitor and look for any signs or any actions that might result in structural damage. And then once the building is relocated and installed, the engineering assessment ensures that the building has survived the move and that the Brant Historical Society is in receipt of a building that they can restore, rather than a building that, while it may look structurally sound, is actually unsafe to occupy. And that would put the Brant Historical Society in a situation where, you know, they are participating in the process. They're trying to restore and secure this building and preserve it for future generations, but it's no longer able to be preserved. So we just want to make sure that with the engineering assessment, we know that the building is essentially ready to go following the relocation. If any issues are found, it would be the duty of Market Street Developments to rectify any structural issues, or the city, if Market Street Developments did not address the problems, the city could draw on those securities. Another requirement of the heritage easement would be for high resolution photographs. The applicant has already provided some photographs through their application. There are just a few areas where staff would like more detail on issues of existing damage with the building. So we have an archival record of the current condition. We know what the condition of the building was before the move, and that way we can differentiate between any existing conditions and anything that results from the move. It also acts as a record of the building at its original site. The photos that were provided will be retained. The new photos are taken through the easement so that the process can continue to move forward, and photos do not delay the processing of the application. Lastly, we are requiring a plaque for 53 Charlotte Street. A plaque was proposed by Market Street Developments through their planning application, something that could recognize the original site at 35 Chatham Street and direct members of the public there. We are taking the plaque through the easement just so that it can be ready to go for when the Brant Historical Society is finalizing its site plan. We'd like to have the plaque in city possession, or at least the details of the plaque, so that it can be captured on the site plan and it's a smoother process for the Brant Historical Society. It was the applicant that proposed this solution, so we do not want to impose a requirement on the Historical Society itself to design and pay for a plaque. The Market Street Developments made the proposal and they can provide the plaque that will be given to the Historical Society for installation on 53 Charlotte. Legal is currently drafting the easement. Once we have the information from legal and discuss with other departments to make sure everyone is aware of and on the same page, it'll be provided to the applicant for their review and comment, and hopefully we can have a discussion between now and committee of the whole and address any of the applicant's concerns. Other conditions are the moving permit. A moving permit is required to move all or part of a building over public roads in the city. It involves a coordination with the building department, with traffic, with emergency services and utilities. So we make sure that through the moving permit, we know if traffic needs to be rerouted. The city knows if emergency services have to avoid the area, and utilities know if there are wires that need to be relocated. So that makes sure that the route of the move is confirmed, everyone's on the same page, and the move itself can occur safely. For 53 Charlotte, site plan agreement is required. The development being proposed for 53 Charlotte triggers a site plan bylaw. Site plan looks at the relationship of a property to its neighbors and the city right-of-way. The Brant Historical Society has submitted a site plan that's currently in review. The site plan process will also look at other matters like driveway access to make sure intersections aren't affected, that it's safe to enter and exit the property. We'll look at grading. The Brant Historical Society also has a severance application with the city, and this is to split 53 Charlotte from the neighboring property that the Brant Historical Society also owns. Staff don't propose needing a severance as a condition for this application because that's a matter for the site plan, just to scope the site plan and make the application more focused on the Crystal Cottage rather than having to take into account any other details that aren't being changed. So for staff, we don't want to deal with site alteration. Those aren't heritage matters. They don't affect the site suitability for heritage. So only the site plan, which is one comprehensive application, it's in progress. That's the condition. And once site plan is cleared and other matters are addressed, the Brant Historical Society can also go to the building permit stage. The building permit deals with the building code and ensures that matters of construction standards and fire safety are adhered to. Essentially, the purpose of the building permit is to indicate that Brant Historical Society is now ready to receive the Crystal Cottage. Site plan agreement ensures that the Brant Historical Society's site is ready to receive the Crystal Cottage. So once those 4 conditions are cleared, staff issue the full approval under the Heritage Act, and the applicant can move on towards the actual relocation process. So step 3 is relocation. That's where the Crystal Cottage is moved. The conditions discussed previously, once satisfied, I'll allow that to occur. So again, the route, that's the moving permit, ensures that relevant departments are aware the move is coordinated, that the site and Brant Historical Society are ready for the Crystal Cottage, and that the engineers there monitoring the move to look for any potential damage. Stage 4, assessment and repair. After that relocation, and the engineer retained by Market Street Developments assesses the Crystal Cottage. If it's found to be structurally sound, we can advance to the next stage. If it's not, the damage is first addressed and then we move to the next stage. Stage 5 and 6, that's where the process splits amongst the 2 properties. So at stage 5, once the building is successfully installed at 53 Charlotte Street, we go back to 35 Chatham. We release the heritage easement. If there's any securities, if they've not been touched or there are remaining securities, those are returned to the applicant. And at that point, the city automatically initiates the repeal of bylaw 685, and that will remove it from title on 35 Chatham Street. At the same time, with the building relocated, the Brant Historical Society completes the restoration of the Crystal Cottage and any remaining site works. Stage 6, the applicant, Market Street Developments, continues to develop the Market and Chatham property. And once restoration of the Crystal Cottage is complete, staff would look at the potential to designate 53 Charlotte Street to continue protecting the Crystal Cottage. So that covers the stages of the relocation. Staff will be presenting all the foregoing information and recommendations to Committee of the Whole Community Development on February 9th for Council's decision based on committee's discussion. That decision will address application HD 0120 under the Ontario Heritage Act and the demolition control application for the Crystal Cottage. So in its role as the commenting body for both applications, staff are recommending that the Brantford Heritage Committee receive the report for information and provide any comments to council via a resolution. Staff will include any of the comments that received from the Heritage Committee into our report to Committee of the Whole Community Development. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Patrick. I'm going to open up to anyone out there who has any questions. Sure, Councillor McCreary.
Madam Chair, thank you very much. Patrick, thanks for the presentation. Can you tell me if we have a lead for the City of Brantford who's going to be looking after the coordination of municipal forces required?
Through you, Madam Chair. So every permit is overseen by a particular department, and they're acting as the point people. So the development planning section of the planning department oversees the site plan. That application is currently in progress, and they're coordinating. With respect to moving permits and building permits, that rests with the building department. So the building department is coordinating the application received from Market Street Developments with traffic and transportation, with police, with utilities. The heritage easement is being coordinated by policy planning staff and legal, and will then be given to the applicant for review. So our conditions of approval act as sort of the check-in with all the various departments. So staff who work on heritage are letting the site plan staff, the experts in that process, oversee that process. Once they're done, we check the box. Once the moving permit matters are addressed, the building department lets staff know, we check the box, and that clears the condition. So we're just overall addressing to make sure that the process is moving forward, but we are relying on the subject matter experts in each department to handle those applications.
Okay, so with respect to the things that happened before the day of the move, then we do not have a concierge who's managing all this information as a single point of contact.
As far as them being conditions, that's where heritage staff are liaising.
No, that's not my question, Patrick. With respect to all the activities that the corporation has to perform to make sure that this move comes off smoothly on the day, do we have a single point of contact with whom the museum and the developer and the house mover can coordinate?
A specific point person hasn't been assigned. I see Victoria logging in, so I'll let you chip in here.
Through the chair, Victoria Coates, intermediate planner and long range planning. Councillor McCreary, we don't have a point person set in place right now, but that's certainly something we can work towards. As Patrick mentioned, at this stage, we're certainly sort of the point person overseeing all of the various applications, but in terms of like the day of the physical move, I think we can have the planning staff work with other departments. Probably the building department is who I'm imagining would look after that, but we can certainly work towards that.
Okay, so that's something we really need to establish in short order then, if we're looking at moving this probably within the next 90 days. So that's something we can take up offline before the week is out, I guess, folks. Now, you know, just to look at the work involved, I've got to think that the authority on this is going to be the building mover. Do you know if municipal staff have had any contact yet with the building moving company?
Through the chair, so the building moving company has, through the moving permit that Patrick was speaking about, their qualifications, their insurance are reviewed through that. The applicant also provided a list of some of the successful moves that this company has completed, but the moving permit process is where that is verified. Yeah. Okay,
so is the building mover, he's obviously being contracted by the developer. So I guess once we establish who our municipal point of contact individual is going to be, I guess that's a discussion that we should probably take up with Mark and with the building mover. And I've got to think that, you know, we don't want to be coming to the day of the move and somebody decides that we should have cut that tree down in front of the house to get it out. So as we get closer and closer and closer here, I think there's a level of detail that the planning department maybe isn't lead on, but that we sure gotta plan in advance for this stuff. And as I said, Victoria, we'll take that. I guess we'll take it up before the week goes out, because if one looks at the amount of people involved in all this, you've got the utility companies, you got Brantford Power, you've got Rogers and Bell Canada, you got Canada Post, you've got the forestry department, you got the engineering department, you got the police department, you got bylaw. This is it's something that we really need to be out front of in short order. So as I said, we'll take this up before the week's out and make sure we get started on this and find somebody that we can put in charge who can either take the accolades or the blame, as the case may be, right? Thank you very much for everybody's work on this from your department as well.
Thanks, Councillor McCreary. Anyone else?
Just a quick question.
Sure.
Do we know what they're going to do with the building yet?
Through you, Madam Chair, the submission by the Brant Historical Society for site plan notes that the Crystal Cottage will be used for office space.
Okay.
Office space it is. So it is asking for some comments to be included in the staff's report. Does anyone have any specific? Yes, Councillor Wall.
Kamara, sorry, if I may just.
I think we have to move it.
Yeah, sorry, if we could just get a mover and a seconder for the item, please.
I will gladly move it.
Second. Councillor McCreary. Melanie.
Go
So
ahead.
that's why I could open the floor up to discussion in the similar way you did before.
We're open. Wait, who's up?
I'll go.
Councillor Wall. Okay.
So my only comment would be is I would like to, these are comments for council? Who are they comments for?
Staff report to the committee of the whole.
I would like to see economic development and tourism work together with the people who are moving this to document it. And I would also like to see some comments made by the Brant Historical Society about what they're going to use the facility for. And I think that's it.
Sorry, I'm writing that down. Councillor McCreary.
Madam Chair, thank you. I guess we should maybe capture my comments in the report to council as well, that the municipality designate a point person to be responsible for all aspects of municipal involvement in the move of the cottage.
Okay. So maybe just 3 items to add for our comments, just to get some information from the Historical Society of the purpose of the proposed renovations to the building, the documentation strategy, I guess, for the move, and then a designated point person of contact with the city so that all, as a liaison, I think that was part of a report that came out a little while ago anyway, as a suggestion. So is Victoria still on?
Still here.
Sorry. Yeah, that seems all reasonable, I guess.
Yeah, so we will take those comments and we will include those in our staff report to the committee of the whole.
Yeah, okay. All right. Do I need a mover for that? Where's Melanie?
So that's all included in clause B. Those will all be captured in the clause B for the blanks.
Perfect.
So if you're satisfied with those, I believe 4 comments, you can call the vote if there's no other comments from members.
Okay. All right. I will call the vote. Everybody that agrees that the report be.
Mara?
Yes, dear.
Love it.
gonna be a lot.
I just have one question. Sorry. Could whoever took the notes, could you just read back the notes? I just want to hear what they are.
Melanie?
Sure. So what I have is that the Economic Development and Tourism departments be included in the process. I believe Victoria might have caught the full wording. Information from the historical, to seek information from the Historical Society on the use of the building and that aspect of it. That the moving of the building be documented through film and other means. And that the municipality designate a staff member to be the lead of and point person for the project.
May I put one more note? Sorry, it might come up at council. I have a feeling that if it gets out that they're moving this or when they're moving it, it could cause quite the spectacle, and they might actually even draw a crowd during COVID, and maybe that should be considered in some capacity.
Interesting.
So to prepare for COVID provisions for moving and potential crowds. So I'll wordsmith it. Sorry.
Sorry. I love the idea. I just want to quantify that. I love the idea that this being a spectacle. I just see people standing on Market Street watching this giant house get lugged down the street. Like, that's a spectacle. And I just think that there might be a way to live stream it for people instead of having them gather on the sidewalks. That's all.
Always part of the documentation. Maybe that can be a suggestion to the person that's going to be there documenting it, pre-advertising or something like that, right? Okay, can I get a vote on the those items to be included with the staff report? Everybody, yes? Yeah, I think that was everybody. Anybody, no? No. Okay. Where's Nathan? You're up now.
Okay. Thank you very much, Vice Chair. Sorry for throwing you into the fire at your first Vice Chair meeting, but you did very well.
Thanks, Nathan.
So I want to thank everyone for that, and we will move on to consent items. So we need a mover and a seconder for the minutes dated December 7th, that they be approved. I see Susan raising her hand, and I remember her being there. Do we have a seconder? Tamara, I saw your hand first. Any discussion on the minutes? Anything with errors or omissions that need to be corrected? Okay, seeing none, I will call the vote then. All those in favor? Hands down. All those opposed? I declare the minutes carried. Thank you very much. We will now move on to projects and other updates. As you may or may not know, Bill 108 provided changes to the Ontario Heritage Act, and staff are going to provide a brief verbal update about the proposed regulation coming forward from those changes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is just a quick update to the Heritage Committee that the proposed Ontario regulation that was originally scheduled to be in force and effect on January 1st has been delayed by the province. Much of the feedback they received from municipalities was that the turnaround time was very quick and the effect on our procedures had the potential to be quite great. So at the moment, they just decided not to implement the changes to the procedures. Everything is status quo for the time being. Ontario regulations are typically brought into force on either January 1st or July 1st. So we will continue to monitor the situation. The province has indicated that they will be consulting in the spring on the new and updated Ontario Heritage Toolkit. So staff will be monitoring for that as well.
Thanks, Patrick. Will you be able to provide information to Heritage Committee members when that information on the Ontario Heritage Toolkit becomes available?
Through Mr. Chair, yes. So staff can keep the committee informed. We just know that it's coming. We don't know the date. No other details have really been provided this time.
Great, thanks. Any other questions from Patrick on this matter? Councillor Wall.
Is there any opportunity for input or anything like that on that particular, or is it just something that kind of gets done?
So the proposed regulation has already been out for public consultation. That's where municipalities submitted their comments. That again, where the concern was there was not much time to actually digest the changes. The Ontario Heritage Toolkit has not been posted for consultation yet. My understanding is that would be through the Environmental Registry of Ontario. That's forthcoming. It is a public website where bills, legislative changes, regulations are posted for public consultation. So staff will monitor the website for any postings on the toolkit.
Is there an opportunity for this committee to comment? Like, I know that that's the same thing, but is that something that we could do, or?
If there, once it's posted, staff do a review and prepare information for council. Typically, the turnaround time is within 1 month. So preparing the report for council with our review deadlines can eat into preparing or having consultation with multiple committees, but individual members of the Heritage Committee are able to comment as private citizens. It is a fully open consultation process in that way. Any comments that staff provide to council would be CC'd to the Heritage Committee.
That was going to be my next question. You read my mind, Patrick. Thank you so much.
Any other questions there for Patrick? I think it's a while since we've had any updates to the Ontario Heritage Act, so it's helpful to get some information about how that whole process unfolds. So thank you very much for that. Moving on to item 8. I have included a small discussion item for next month's Heritage Committee meeting about our subcommittees. So we have a number of subcommittees, and we've also had a number of members who have served their terms on Heritage Committee to very great effect over the years. And so some of the subcommittees do not have a full complement of members. So I bring this up now briefly to encourage people to consider if they would like to assist with one of these subcommittees. And they should email myself and Melanie before the February meeting if they would like to be considered. So the Designation Bylaw Review Subcommittee, all of those positions are vacant, and we should consider whether that committee should continue to exist. The Heritage Education Subcommittee, currently I am the chair with Colleen as one member and Jamie, who's here as our other member. So that committee has a full complement. The next one would be the Heritage Estates Subcommittee. I believe Councillor McCurry, myself, are on that committee, and our former chair was Member Bartle, who is no longer with us, so that has a vacancy on that committee. Our Places of Worship Subcommittee is chaired by Member Adlam. I am on that subcommittee as well, and Member Gardner, who recently completed her terms, was also on that committee, so that there's one vacancy on that committee. The Prominence Point Subcommittee, both Councillor McCurry and Councillor Wall have served on that committee, and our chair was Member McDonald, who is also a former chair of the committee. So there is a vacancy on the Prominence Point Subcommittee, and that has important implications for our mandate, because the Prominence Point is encompassed within our mandate. So something important to consider there. So I just provided that brief synopsis so that people can think about if they would like to be on one of those committees. With that being said, there are no resolutions and no notices of motion. So at this time, I would entertain a motion for adjournment. Moved by Susan, Thank you very much, everyone, for meeting tonight.